Sir, you're charged with especially aggravated kidnapping. You're also charged with aggravated assault, and you're charged with theft of a firearm worth less than $2,500.
You're talking about stuff that is not relevant.
Hello and welcome to the Court of Public Opinion. I am the Recovery Addict, and boy do I have a case for you today.
Why is the dog chewing on this guy?
I think they have got the wrong guy there.
Got the wrong guy, and the dog was biting him.
He roughened him up quite a bit. There's a lawsuit.
This is the next search on February 28, 2020, 7:44 p.m. How does the FBI find people? The people is misspelled P-E-O-O-P-L-E. Did the defendant find out how the FBI finds people in this case? Oh, she found out.
Because we here in Canada hate you and hope for bad things for you because we hate you.
Welcome back to the Court of Public Opinion. I am the Recovery Addict. I love that little soundbite from Ian. This is so good. Oh, wow. Let's see. See, we need to get you in green. Horse rescue. Itchy Withers Horse Rescue. We need to get you in green. Seat works if you're in green. Sample user 1. Nice. Congratulations, sample user. Yes. Got a little E in there. I want to trim it down. I mean, I like the entire. The funny thing is that the irony. Canadians are amazing. Every Canadian I know, on any sort of personal level, is a better human being than I am. But that's why it's so funny to hear.
You look good.
To hear Ian come out with.
Because we here in Canada hate you and hope for bad things for you because we hate you.
Yes, that was directed towards UPS, by the way, which everyone in Canada can agree they hate. Are we watching the neighbor sentencing? Yes, we are. We're going down to watch that here in just moments. We'll be down there. I was going to show you. We covered this. We called it the bad neighbor trial when we covered this trial, and it's also the get off my lawn trial. If you guys remember, this is the lady who didn't like the kids playing too close to her house and yelling at the kids to be quiet and everything else. And eventually the neighbor comes over and knocks on the door and she shoots her through the door. Yeah, it was that one. Her sentencing is today. So we'll be back here with that in just a minute. Right now it's just a view of court. Let's see. There we go. That's all we get right now. It's just the Great Seal of the State of Florida, which is beautiful in full color. I mean, it's rendered in like 8-bit color, but still, it's beautiful. The one where the door was the evidence. Yes,
if they didn't,
with
I
the
would
door
lose
jam and
my
everything.
mind.
Yep, that's the very one. That's the one. So I did get the cable I was waiting for, and I'm excited to use it. I'm excited to test it. The best thing about having Starlink is never again will I ever go camping and not have the internet. I'm stoked. I really am. I'm super excited. I'll have the internet everywhere I go for the rest of my life, as long as I don't leave the country, which I do plan on doing occasionally. But what's a good thumbnail, as I recall? I was going to pull it up here if I could.
I saw a chicken fight.
Sloth Life, thank you very much for gifting a membership. That's a great way to kick off the afternoon. Let's see. Where was another completely irrelevant fact? I'm currently studying for an upgrade in my ham radio license. Right? Yes, this will be the sentencing, Wayne. This is the sentencing today. I do have the roaming Starlink. I have the roaming plan.
Taking it easy.
With the Starlink Mini. The Mini because it fits in the sunroof of my car, in my wife's car. I don't have a sunroof in my car. I don't have a car, come to think of. Why do I not have a car? Mrs. R.A. has a car, and my son has a car, and I do not have one. I guess my son's car used to be Mrs. R.A.'s car, and then we bought a new one. Well, but we bought the new one to replace my car, which my son wrecked. Now my son got Mrs. R.A.'s car, and then Mrs. R.A. got the new car. I don't know how that worked out. I lost in that deal somewhere. Lost in that deal. Why does Mrs. R.A. have a phone? Because if she had one, she would leave it turned off. And we figure, why waste the money if she's not going to turn it on? She has a car because she doesn't have a phone. That's why. But I got a new cable. Yes. We can make a sunroof for you. Thank you for the offer. I'll turn that one down, though, if that's all right. Fleischer had an interesting case as a duo that wanted out of Arizona. I'll have to take a look at that. Did you buy a grill when this happened? No. No grills for us. We're not buying grills. We do share that vehicle. Honestly, it's the one I drive whenever I go anywhere. She lets me take her car. You work from home, you don't need a car. This is a point as well, Kathy. You two are an anomaly wrapped in a conundrum. I wouldn't have it any other way. I love it. It's a great place to be. All right. We were waiting for court. Well, hold on right there. Mrs. R.A. has a phone. So R.A. has a phone and no car. Mrs. R.A. has a car and no phone. Seems about right. Yes. Honestly, when we go anywhere big, we go together for the most part. Crime in Baltimore is so bad, my auto insurance is higher for working from home. Greeners, that's terrible. That's terrible. Like a sausage wrapped in bacon. Where's that thumbnail? Oh, I was getting to the thumbnail. Sorry. I was getting there. Just 1 second. I was just in that a minute ago. Here we go. Bad neighbor trial. We'll load it up on the switcher. Oh, actually my switcher's over here. It's downloading right now. Give us just a minute. We'll have it up for you. I think we've got some action in court. Yep, we do. There we go. Judge is back.
You guys ready to go?
We're ready, Judge.
Yes, sir.
Yes, Your Honor. The state's ready to proceed.
All right, we're here on State of Florida versus Susan Lorincz. Case number 23 CF 2236. Give me 1 second to get this going.
We'll give you a second, Judge. In the meanwhile, I'm going to show you this. That's our thumbnail we made for this trial, if you remember this one. That's the actual scene from our yard with the lasers and all that. That was pretty good.
I see Miss Lawrence is here. So that's one. Is there any reason not to proceed sentencing at this time?
No, sir.
Anything from the state?
No, Your Honor.
All right. State of Florida have any person they want to call for sentencing?
Yes, Your Honor. The state would call Ms. Pamela Diaz. She has a statement prepared to read to the court.
Yes, sir.
Looks like they both have statements to read. We might hear from the defendant or the convicted.
My name is Pamela Diaz. I am the mother of Ashika Owens, who was shot and killed by Susan Lorincz. I stand before you with the burden of articulating and conveying the depth of our grief and the trauma that Susan Lorincz inflicted on our lives. And to also share the devastating impact that Susan caused when she fatally shot my daughter, Ashika Owens, on June 2nd of 2023. It is virtually impossible to convey all of the ways Susan has devastated our lives. But I'm going to try and convey some of the most impactful ways. My baby girl, my only daughter, Ajika Chantrell Owens, whom I gave life to, is gone forever. Susan Lorincz took her life at the age of 35 years old. I stand before you not only mourning the loss of my daughter, but also the loss of our hopes, dreams, and the future that we often spoke of. Our plans and promises to one another as mother and daughter will never come to light. They all died the night Susan Lorincz killed my daughter. There's no greater pain than to bury your child. Mere words can never fully explain this type of pain. No one knows the heartache that I endure unless they too have lost a child in this manner. The gnawing at my heart and the unending pain keeps me up every night. I lay in bed wondering, what was those last moments? What were the last moments? What were those last moments like for Ashika when she realized she had been shot in the chest by Susan? I think about what she was thinking when she was lying face down on the ground, fighting for her life, fighting to stay alive for her 4 children. Then I think about the sheer terror and the distress that my grandchildren went through, witnessing their mom dying at the hands of Susan. I think about the pain she must have felt as she took her life, her last breath. This haunts me each and every night. I'm still trying to grasp and cope with the fact that my daughter, my baby girl, is lying 6 feet underground, breathless, lifeless, and will never be with us again. I stand before you a mere shell of the person that I once was. I am overwhelmingly consumed with grief. It has taken over my life. Every hour of the day, I fight back the tears, fight the urge to scream, but I cry silent tears. I've lost that natural smile and happiness and zest for life that I once had. My relationships are not what they used to be with my friends and family. I feel isolated in my suffering. New relationships formed will never know the real Pam. They've met the Pam in death, not Pam in life. That Pam is gone forever. Every part of my life has been impacted. When Susan killed Ashika, she took away my freedom, the plans that I had for my own personal life. Because Ashika is no longer here, I became the sole caretaker of 4 young children, my grandchildren, whom I love dearly. I relocated from my home, from another state. I was forced to resign from a career that I loved as a flight attendant, where I was traveling the world, happy. I lost time from work, and I still struggle to maintain the ability, the mental capacity to concentrate and maintain employment. My freedom and liberty to do many of the things that most people take for granted have been stripped away. The simple things that most people take for granted no longer exist for me. I left behind my social life, my friends, because my grandchildren needed me. They had no one. Because Susan killed the most important person, their rock, their support, their constant. She took that from them. I don't get the luxury of instinctively waking up and rolling out of bed. I have to make a deliberate attempt to get out of bed, to be present, choosing life outside of my four walls in order to be present for my grandchildren and not to succumb to the pain and the grief and the sadness that I carry daily. As you can imagine, this is an enormously difficult time for our family. I am faced with the challenge of meeting the needs of the children alongside my own emotional and everyday needs. I worry for them. I worry for the future of my grandchildren. I wasn't financially prepared to raise children at this stage of my life. Susan took away their vibrant young mother. Now they have their grandmother raising them. I stress over what life will be like for them if something were to happen to me. Who's going to care for them? Who will support them? Will they become a burden of the state? Susan took emotional and financial stability from the children. I was a lifeline for our family. I offer support. It's now me alone who has to shoulder the responsibility of their well-being. There is not a day, not an hour that I do not mourn for my daughter. But I also mourn for my grandchildren. I weep for them. Every tear from my eyes is for Titus, Africa, Israel, and Isaac. I see the pain in their eyes, even when they seem like they're happy. I recognize it because I carry that same pain. Our true essence and being of who we once were is gone forever. But we put on a brave face to face the world. But on the inside, we're hurting with a pain that will never go away. There is a hole in our heart that will never mend. I know this because these are the conversations These are the talks that we have on a regular basis. No one can fully understand the turmoil, the gravity of Susan killing my daughter. Susan killing Isaac, Israel, Africa, and Titus's mother. Susan destroyed our family. She destroyed our family. She killed our family. The children are left with a lifetime of scars. Not 5 years, not 10 years, not 20 years, not 30 years, a lifetime of scars and trauma. It's unfair and it's not right. It's not fair and it's not right that these 4 babies who are still in the early years of their development have to endure such complex and massive trauma. Witnessing their mother shot and killed by Susan. The frenzy of having to go from door to door to seek help that ultimately would not have saved their mother. Then burying their mother at the ages of 3, 7, 9, and 12. 4 children, 3, 7, 9, and 12, buried their mother because Susan Lorincz shot and killed their mother through a locked metal door. This type of trauma that they've endured so early on in life will ultimately alter the course of their future development. It already has. Everyday activities, going out to eat, going to the movies, trips to the grocery store, they all can be triggering. Whenever they see an older white woman that remotely resembles Susan, the fear, the uneasiness, it immediately takes over. They become afraid and they feel unsafe. Young children should not have to live like this. But Susan single-handedly instilled this fear and distrust of people who don't resemble them. This is the trauma that Susan inflicted on their lives. Isaac, Israel, Africa, Titus. They only have 3 to 12 years of memories with their mother. Titus, the baby, his memory will ultimately fade. The reality is that he will more than likely never remember his mother. His recollection of his mom will never be of his own. It's all going to be of the stories and the memories that we share with him. He'll never remember what it was like for her to sing to him at night, for her to rub his back to sleep. It breaks my heart when I hear this sweet boy say, I want mommy. I miss mommy, knowing she's never coming back. I miss her too. I want her back too. Isaac, Israel, and Africa, her friends, her loved ones want her back. She's not coming back. Susan took our ability to create memories with Ashika when she shot and killed her. The football mom, the cheerleading mom, the wiping of the tears mom, the kissing and hugging mom that made her kids feel better is gone forever. There'll be no more hugs. There'll be no more kisses. There'll be no more talks. No one can fill that role for the children, not even me as their loving grandmother. These babies now have to watch other kids growing up with their mothers, see them holding their hands, see them cheering them on at school events, all the while knowing that their mother is never coming back. Every second Sunday in May, Mother's Day, is now a reminder of what they've lost, of what they no longer have. A mother. It's a day of mourning. Birthdays and holidays are no longer celebratory as they once were. Ashika will forever be missing as part of the celebration. She won't be present for the baptisms, the prom, graduations, their first love, their breakups, engagements, marriages, children, all the important pivotals, all the important moments that a parent and a child share together. Our family dynamics have changed. Our family relationships have been affected because we now have to deal with the turmoil and the confusion of all of these emotions. My grandchildren lost a fun, loving grandmother in me. I can't be that to them anymore because I have to fill the role of a parent. I've assumed the parental role. I do this while struggling with my own grief, my own pain, and my own suffering. Future generations will be impacted. 4 young children are now growing up without the nurturing and the love of their mother. Their children will be raised by parents who sustained trauma at a very early age. Their children's children will never know Ashika as a grandmother. Ashika was a beloved daughter, sister, aunt, and friend to many. The loss of her life has impacted the nation. People near and far are hurting alongside the family. But most of all, Ashika was a loving and devoted mother to her 4 beautiful, innocent children. She lived and breathed being a mom. Susan took that breath. So we all know being a mother doesn't end at age 18 or 21. Children need their mother well into adulthood. But Susan's reckless act of manslaughter rendered my 4 grandchildren motherless. Sadly, Titus, Africa, Israel, Isaac have to live their remaining lives as a motherless child. A motherless child. I stand before you, not as a brave and courageous mother, not as a strong grandmother. I stand before you as a broken-hearted mother, a mother in despair who lost her daughter. I stand before you as an advocate for Isaac, Israel, Africa, and Titus. I stand before you for our future generations to come. Our pain and suffering didn't end when we buried Ashika. Our pain and suffering didn't end when Susan was found guilty of manslaughter. Our pain and suffering won't end with today's sentencing. Our pain and suffering will last a lifetime. A lifetime. Ashika died protecting her children from Susan Lorincz. Susan antagonized the children for years. She belittled them. She berated them. Her heinous act showed she doesn't have respect for the law. She doesn't have respect for law enforcement. Within 2 minutes of law enforcement on the way, Susan knew they were en route. Susan made the hateful act. She chose the hateful act of shooting Ashika who was unarmed, through a locked metal door a single mother of 4. Susan was safe and secure in her home with law enforcement en route. She was not in danger. But Susan chose to shoot and kill. Many are saddened. I'm saddened. The children are saddened. I miss my daughter. The children miss their mom. Friends, loved ones miss Ashika. We loved her, and she loved us. We will carry this feeling of pain and loss for the remainder of our lives. Susan killed Ashika. Ashika is never coming back. This was the ultimate tragedy. And there's nothing more devastating than the loss of Ashika that should have never, ever happened. Susan hasn't shown remorse for shooting Ashika. She has not shown remorse for killing Ashika. She has not shown remorse for leaving 4 children motherless. From the onset of the proceedings, Susan was bold and brazen. When the guilty verdict was read, Susan shrugged her shoulders as to say, oh well. If she showed a modicum of remorse, it was not for Ashika. It was not for my 4 grandchildren. It was for her own selfish reasons. Susan Louise Lorincz was unanimously found guilty of manslaughter by use of a firearm by a jury of her peers for shooting Ashika through a locked metal door. For the pain, the suffering, the life-altering consequences of Susan's heinous actions that have been inflicted on our lives. I am begging you, I am pleading that you hold Susan fully accountable for her actions. Four motherless children's lives. 4 motherless children's future depend on it. Susan doesn't deserve any leniency. There is no getting back of life. Someone is dead. A mother, a daughter is dead forever. And that is the reality that we must live with forever. Thank you.
Thank you very much, ma'am.
Let's see if Susan speaks.
We have nothing further to present, Judge.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Judge, may I approach the clerk?
Sure.
Susan came in with some papers.
Smith, Latham, pre-marked for identification purposes only in defense A. Judge, the defense will enter with the Martha's Defense AF Defense 1 and has a business record certification attached to it. These are records from APT of Central Florida relating to Susan Lorincz and mental health diagnosis of PTSD. I think this will become relevant when Dr. Castillo testifies.
Okay. Any objection to coming in evidence?
No, Your Honor.
Medical records involving
Coming
PTSD.
in evidence is defense number 1.
Thank you, Judge.
Your Honor, we have 5 witnesses to present for your consideration.
Yes, sir.
They are all present, and we'll start off with Crystal Jewel Maxell. Maxell.
It's a lot. 5 witnesses for the defense, and they're. Sounds like we've got a doctor testifying.
Ma'am, standing before the clerk, raise your right hand.
Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes.
May it please the court?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Please tell us your full name,
Crystal Jewel Maxu.
and will you please tell us what you do for a living?
I own a cleaning company.
And are you local to the area?
Yes, I am.
How do you know Susan Lorincz?
I have known her probably since 2012. I met her at a church called Ocala Farm Ministries.
Is Susan a devout Christian?
Yeah.
Was Susan always praying for you and your family and other people?
Yes.
Did there come a time where your niece was having a very difficult time in her life?
Yes.
And did Susan help in that process?
Yes, she actually mentored her.
How did Susan mentor your niece?
She would call her. She was in and out of some issues with mental health. And she would go and check on her and bake her food and call her and pray with her.
How would you describe Susan in general?
Very kind and generous. Pretty consistent.
Would you describe her as a good friend?
Yes, 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 yes.
Did Susan speak with you about her difficult childhood?
Briefly, I know that she had some very specific trauma concerning her childhood with her father.
Now, she never got into details with you?
No. No, sir.
Yes, I'm sorry.
No, I just said no, sir.
Now, did you and Susan together pray for Susan and what she went through in her childhood?
Yes, we have prayed a few times.
And what did the prayers consist of?
Just healing.
Healing for Susan?
Yeah.
And the residue of the trauma?
Correct.
Is Susan a good chef?
Oh, my. Yes, yes, yes.
Please tell us about that.
Well, she's baked for us and cooked for us for many years, even at our wedding. My husband and I, she cooked for 3 days, 3 straight days for us. And we had about 200-300 people there at the church, and she just would not stop cooking and baking, and she just continues to invite us over during the holidays and stuff, and she would cook just amazing things.
Was Susan, in your interactions with her, always helping people?
Yes, yes.
In what way?
All the time. She was just giving to people, cooking for them, going to give food away. She would help her sister. She would help her nephew. She would always give me rides when I had no ride or no license, actually, in the beginning of our friendship, to St. Augustine to see my mom, who was handicapped, and my children.
Now, let's talk a little bit about Susan's sister. Susan has a sister?
Yes.
What is her name?
Ellen.
And how did Susan go about helping Ellen and her issues?
Well, she took her in a few times that I know of. Was always taking care of her, always taking care of her nephew. I was there when he was born at the hospital. Basically, I can't multiple places that she lived. She would always bring Ellen with her.
Now,
Defense
Ellen
is
has a
trying to
son.
present
I think you mentioned him. His
Gabriel.
name is Gabriel.
Yes,
Any
sir.
mitigating information they can.
How was Susan
Sentence.
as a aunt to Gabriel?
Amazing. She would, even at holidays and stuff, she was always buying him stuff, taking care of him.
Always concerned about him, always.
Now, you mentioned that your family or your mom lived in St. Augustine?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And was it at that point, was it difficult for you to get to St. Augustine to see them?
Yes.
And how would Susan help in that process?
She would offer me rides. She wouldn't even take money from me. She would help me. My mom and her actually became really good friends before my mom went home to the Lord, and just was there for me. Anytime, she'd always ask me if I need rides, take me to the store. Would have never asked me for money or anything.
Is it safe to say that Susan has been a good friend to you?
Yes, yes.
When you first met Susan, were you starting a new life here in Ocala?
Yes.
And how were you starting a new life?
I moved here from a rehabilitation home and decided to make a decision to leave everything behind in St. Augustine and start a new life. And I started working at the Melting Pot and went over to Ocala Farm Ministries. They actually picked me up every single week for 10 months, and that's where I met her. And then she befriended me, and she was on a farm with some horses that she had, and her and her sister. And they were nothing. They never expected anything from me. They just always wanted to help me.
In this process of you rebuilding your life and starting a new life here in Ocala, did Susan help in that process?
Yes.
In what way?
Just being a friend, being there, helping with a new type of friendship. And, she, like I said, she would help me get on my feet. She gave me rides, just multiple different things that she would do to support.
From your interactions with Susan, is she a violent person?
No.
That you have known her, which has been approximately 12, 13 years at this point?
Yeah. Yes, sir.
Is she a hard worker?
Yes.
In what way?
She's always working. We barely, actually, towards the last few years, we didn't get a lot of time to spend together. Holidays, she would always usually be cooking. But she was working at different places, and she was working like 50, 60 hours a week. And then she had some licensing she got from home and was working at home, but a lot of working.
Did she financially maintain herself and pay her own bills?
Yes.
Have you had an opportunity to see Susan interact with people?
Yes.
How does she interact with people?
Normal. Nothing abnormal. She was actually, with a church event she would invite me to because she sang. And she was really close to the church and the events, and she would always invite us to do like the monthly church, I guess maybe eating and where they have fellowship. And we went down there, and she was just always friendly.
Does Susan have a big heart?
Yes.
You mentioned her singing at church. Did she sing in the choir at church?
Yes.
Does she have a talent for singing?
Yes.
What kind of voice does she have?
I think it's called soprano. Not sure. Opera. It's like an opera. She sounds like an opera singer.
And would she always sing at church and volunteer her time in that way? Did there come a time where Susan confided in you that she was having problems at home?
Yes, a few times she would ask me to pray for her for the next door people in the neighborhood.
But she never gave you specifics?
Not exact specifics, no.
Did you ever go to her home?
Yes.
Did you hear, was there a lot going on in the neighborhood?
It was loud.
Was Susan one to discuss her feelings with you?
Here and there. She was mainly getting to where she had mentioned the neighborhood, like she was thinking about moving.
Have you ever been in a situation with Susan where she has felt like she was in danger?
No.
Were you shocked when you heard that Susan was involved in this incident?
Very.
And why is that?
Well, I had to actually look on the internet to find out, and just that it's almost completely opposite of the person that I know, to be honest with you.
How has Susan's friendship helped you become a better person?
My past has led me to where I'm at today, and she was one of the very first people that befriended me. I didn't even know what a friend was. I didn't know how to be a good friend in my past. And it was always either take, give and take. And she was very much of a giver. And during this friendship, I learned from her on how to really treat people. And I believe, honestly, that God brought her into my life to help me to be a better person and a better friend. And today I know how to be a friend. And so it was for me, I thought about that for a long time. And she's been a consistent friend to me. Who would I be if I didn't come up here and say this today, the truth?
Thank you. Your Honor, I have no further questions.
Anything from the state?
No, Your Honor.
Thank you very much, man.
Next witness, Your Honor, is Michael Maxo. Maxo.
Raise your right hand for me. Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
May it please the court, Your Honor?
Yes, sir.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Please tell us your full name.
Michael Antoine Maxu.
And what do you do for a living?
I do property removal.
And do you live in the area, in the Ocala area?
Yes.
Now, Crystal, is that your wife?
Yes.
And how long have you all been married?
8 years.
How long have you...
November 10th was our anniversary.
Yes, sir. How long have you known Susan?
About 8 years.
Was it Crystal that introduced you to Susan?
Yes.
And did you all at one point go to the same church together?
Yes.
Which one is that?
Open Door Community Church in Summerfield.
Okay. How would you describe Susan?
She just was pleasant and kind person.
Kind in what way?
Just very outgoing and generous. She liked to cook and, just pleasant. Just pleasant person.
Is she a good chef?
Yes.
Has she been a good friend to you and to your wife, Crystal?
Yes, we've done, a few holidays together and, like Thanksgiving and whatnot. And
was Susan always helping people?
Yes.
In what way?
She just, she worked for, as a chef, for a nursing home and stuff like that. She used to always give my wife rides when she needed her before I was in the picture. She would come and pick her up and take her to church and things like that.
Did she actually cook for your wedding for days and days?
Yes.
Is she a caretaker to her sister Ellen?
As far as I know. She took care of Ellen's, her nephew for the most part.
Her nephew Gabriel?
Yes.
Ellen's son?
Ellen's son, yes.
Have you ever seen Susan be violent or aggressive?
No, sir.
Is Susan a hard worker?
Yes.
In what way?
When she was chefing, she would work 60 hours a week.
Did she financially maintain herself and pay her own bills?
Yes, she did.
Did Susan sing at the church that you all attended?
Yes.
What kind of voice does Susan have?
She has an opera voice.
Have you ever been in a situation with Susan where she felt like she was in danger?
Not that I can recall.
Were you shocked when you heard about the incident that Susan was involved in?
Yes.
And why were you shocked?
Just out of her character.
In what way?
Just, I guess you wouldn't expect someone that you know and have been close to do something like that.
Okay. I have no further questions, Your Honor.
Do you have any questions?
No, Your Honor.
Thank you very much, sir.
Next is Shannon Harris, Your Honor.
Name, face, clerk. Thank you.
You swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Have a seat, please. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon.
Hi.
Please tell us your full name.
Shannon Lynn Harris.
And what do you do for a living, Ms. Harris?
I am a pastor. I have been for the last 10 years.
A pastor where?
I pastor Anthony United Methodist Church and also Shiloh United Methodist Church up in Micanopy.
And how long have you known Susan Lorincz?
I met Susan when I started at Anthony United Methodist Church in July of 2022.
How would you describe Susan?
Kind, loving. Several years ago, well, that would have been 2023. My husband was in the hospital in Tampa. My mother-in-law was in Advent Hospital. My sister-in-law was in Gainesville. My brother-in-law and I were trying to take care of everybody. And all of the family except for me got COVID. So things were difficult when we brought them home. And Susan brought over a large thing of lasagna, some salads. She said, if you need anything, if you need to just talk, if you need to vent, I'm here.
Was Susan a constant supporting force for you during that difficult time?
Absolutely, yes. It was a very difficult time. My husband's cancer had metastasized, and it's sometimes very difficult. Being the pastor, you don't necessarily get taken care of all the time in the ways that Sue helped to take care of me.
Besides providing food and things of substance for you all to eat and drink, did she provide emotional support for you when your husband was dying?
Yes.
In
yes.
what way?
Yes, she absolutely. She would let me know that she was praying for me. On Sundays, she would make sure that I got an extra big hug. She would ask how my week was. You know, she was always concerned with, was I doing okay? And reminding me that I needed to take care of me if I was going to take care of others as well.
Did Susan make this very difficult time in your life just a little bit better?
Yes, absolutely, because she was such a calm presence.
Have you seen her interact with her sister, Ellen?
Yes.
What kind of sister is she to Ellen?
Oh, she was fantastic. Ellen faced a lot of health challenges, and Susan was always there to help her, to encourage her, to lift her up in some pretty trying times.
Does Ellen have a son?
Yes.
Does Ellen's son have some issues, if you will?
Yes, he does.
And did Susan help Ellen in taking care of her son, that being Ellen's son?
Yes.
In what way?
Well, the first couple of times that I met her son at church, he was with his aunt. And
he was with Susan?
Yes. And I didn't know whether that, I thought maybe it was either her child or a grandchild. And come to find out that she was actually his aunt, and he did so amazing with her because he could be a challenge, particularly in service. Thankfully, the parishioners were gracious, but he could be a little tough to wrangle in sometimes, I guess we could say.
Do Susan and Gabriel have a close bond?
Absolutely, yes.
Have you ever seen Susan have a conflict with anyone?
No.
Is Susan violent at all?
No, not that I've seen.
How is she in general from what you saw with children and adults?
Oh, she was great. The girls at the church absolutely loved her. She would hang out with them. We have a fellowship time after service. And Sue would frequently make goodies for that. And then she would talk to, we have 2 young ladies that attend our church. And she was always very, very good with the girls, interested in what they were doing in the Girl Scouts, and just very good at communicating with them.
Have you ever seen Susan be aggressive?
No.
Impolite?
No.
Would you describe Susan as reserved?
Yes.
In what way?
She kind of kept to herself a lot of times, and it took a little bit. There was, I don't know how to describe it, maybe almost like a wall of sorts, I guess.
Okay.
And once you broke through that and you gained her trust, then she would be more open. But it took a little bit to get through that.
Have you ever seen Susan be in a dangerous situation or a stressful situation?
No.
We've heard that Susan sings at church.
Yes, beautifully.
And did she volunteer a lot of her time in doing that?
She did, not only with that, but with our drive-through dinner church, which is a one Saturday night a month. We serve dinner to the community. It's a free dinner. And Susan would frequently help out with making desserts for that. She would come to help us set up. She would help to serve. She also made the treats for our fellowship time after church on Sundays. So she was always serving in one way or another. If some of our elderly folks were having issues trying to figure out what insurance to get, Sue would sit down with them and help them navigate that difficult process. She was
and Susan, I'm sorry.
Yes.
Susan worked in the insurance industry, right?
Yes.
So she would help out those individuals when they had questions about what I should get, what kind of coverage I should get, things of that nature?
Yes, absolutely. And I have a lot of, let's call them wise folks in the congregation that I serve that really had a difficult time navigating that.
And Susan helped them?
She did. She would offer rides if they needed rides. We have several widows that if they needed rides to the doctor when they weren't feeling well. So yeah, she was always involved in something at the church.
Did Susan ever mention that she was having problems at home?
Yes.
And did she ask you to pray?
Yes.
In regard to her problems she was having at home?
She did, yes, and in particular trying to find a place to move.
Okay. Anything else that you'd like to share with us regarding Susan?
She just, how do I say this? I'm sorry, I'm getting emotional. I truly am shocked by what happened. It sent shockwaves through the entire church because this is just not, she was there, I'm not sure exactly how many years.
She was there before your time?
She was there, yes, well before my time. And this is just not the person that we know. That's all I can say.
And you actually had counselors come to the church and speak to other individuals?
Yes, this was absolutely devastating. So we did bring a professional in to help people to kind of process as best as we could.
Okay. Your Honor, I don't have any further questions.
Do you have any questions?
No, Your Honor.
Thank you very much,
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, Judge.
Your Honor, Ellen Lorincz.
Yeah, right here, ma'am.
Raise your right hand for me.
Are you able to?
You swear or affirm?
Hold on one sec. You can sit down and do it.
Okay.
She can sit down and be. There's no requirement to stand.
Do Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Amen. Yep.
Good afternoon.
Hello. Good afternoon.
Please tell us your full name.
Ellen Dorothy Lorincz.
How do you know Susan?
She's my sister.
Are you older or younger than Susan?
I'm younger.
By how much?
4 years.
Were you raised with Susan?
Yes, I was.
Do you and Susan have the same biological parents?
Yes, we do.
And were you raised by both parents?
Yes, we were.
Does your family have a history of mental health issues?
Yes.
What was your mother's name?
Mildred Caroline Wargacki Lorincz.
What was she like?
She was pretty much a good mom, but she had a lot of depression issues. My father was a drunk and he gambled a lot of money away. So my mom always had to work extra to keep, the family together.
And you said she suffered from depression?
Yes.
What was your paternal grandfather's name?
Imrana Lorincz.
And what was he like?
I don't know because he hung himself about a month before I was born.
What is your brother's name?
Stephen Louis Lorincz.
Does he have the same biological parents as you and Susan?
Yes, he does.
What is your brother like?
My brother is also a drunk. He's very violent at times. I haven't had any contact with him. After my mother died, he assaulted me, and I had a restraining order against him, and
You haven't seen him since?
yeah, pretty
And
much.
was Susan there when he assaulted you?
Yes, she was.
How about your Uncle Freddie Wargacki? What was he like?
I only met him a couple of times, but I remember vividly the one, we were having a picnic outside of our house, and my Uncle Freddie was, I guess, seeing or talking to somebody in his mind, and he decided to try and burn our house down.
And was he a paranoid schizophrenic with PTSD?
Yes, he was.
Was your Uncle Freddie on your mom's side or your dad's side?
My mother's side.
How about yourself? Do you suffer from mental health issues?
Yes, I do.
Will you please speak with us about that?
I've been diagnosed with PTSD, Stockholm Syndrome, and also bipolar depression.
And by PTSD, are you referring to post-traumatic stress disorder?
Yes, I am.
What is the cause of your PTSD and bipolar disorder?
My father had been raping me since the time I was about 4 years old. And he beat us a lot when we were younger, especially.
What was your father's name?
Stephen Lorincz.
When did your father begin abusing you and Susan?
I guess he started with Susan before I was born. And then after I was born, he waited till I was like 3-4 years old before he started doing whatever to me. I really don't remember it because I've kind of pushed it out of my mind.
And did he sexually abuse both you and Susan starting at a young age?
Yes, he did.
For years, did you blame yourself for allowing him to rape you?
Yeah, I did.
Please tell us a little bit about your father's background.
My father was born in Hungary, a town called Nudvarod, and he was a freedom fighter in 1956, and that's how he ended up in the United States. He was sponsored by our Hungarian church up north in New Jersey.
Was he a concentration camp prisoner?
Yes, he was at one point.
Was he, in addition to the sexual abuse, was he physically abusive to both you and your siblings?
Basically, my father was physically, emotionally, and sexually abusive to all of us, except my brother with the sexual.
Was there an instance where you and Susan were present where your father beat your brother Stephen on Easter Sunday?
Yes.
Will you please tell us about that?
My brother had gone out partying all night, and he came home probably about 4 or 5 in the morning, and he was sleeping, and my dad wanted us all to go to church together. And my brother was like, no, I don't have to go to church. He was 18 already. And he's like, I don't have to, I'm an adult. And my father's like, no, you're getting up. And I remember him dragging him out of his room. And then they started pushing and shoving. And the next thing I know, my father was beating my brother so badly that he was unconscious. And he was still hitting him. And my sister and my mother had to pull him off of my brother.
Was your father physically strong?
Yes, he was a sheetrocker. And he worked in construction, so he was very strong.
Now, a few minutes ago, you were discussing your mother and saying that she suffered from depression.
Mm-hmm.
As a result of that depression, were a lot of the household duties put on you and Susan?
Yes.
In what way?
We were expected to, it started off with Sue, because she was older, that she would have to come home and make food for my family. And then when my sister got she got babysitting jobs, and then I got to, take over the duties of cooking. And, Sue was always the one who cleaned most of the time, and she was the one who did a lot of the laundry.
What would your father do to you and Susan if the food wasn't ready when he was ready to eat?
Oh, he would scream and yell at us and then tell us how stupid we were, and then he'd start beating us.
Would he beat you and Susan unconscious at times?
He had one occasion I can remember had beaten me because I wanted to run. I told him I was going to run away from home because he was just so horrible. And I told him I was going to go live in New York City and find a way to get away from him. And he's like, well, you're going to be homeless in New York City. This is what they do to homeless people. And he proceeded to beat the living snot out of me to the point where we had a central heating register in the one house we lived in. And I remember waking up on that, and I was bruised all over. And he was just so aggressive. And he's like, see, that's what's going to happen to you.
Was your father psychologically abusive as well?
Absolutely.
In what way?
He constantly told us that we were fat and stupid. We were ugly. I mean, just any kind of derogatory thing he could think of to call us.
Was there a time in high school where you had lost a significant amount of weight and wanted to buy a dress?
Yeah, I went on a diet. I went on Weight Watchers with my mom, and I proceeded to lose 100 pounds because I was 300 pounds in high school, and I went down to 199 pounds, which was huge for me. And I was trying to get some new clothes, and my father's like, well, it doesn't matter. You're ugly anyway. Just go put a potato sack on.
Was he that way with Susan as well?
Yes, he was.
And was Susan overweight in high school as well?
Yes.
Was your father verbally abusive to your mother as well?
On occasion, yeah. He would tell her she's a stupid, educated dummy. That was his favorite saying. And you're a fat pig. And he would tell her to stop eating, and just nasty in general.
When did the rapes begin for you?
Apparently, I was 4 years old, and my sister and my mom and my brother had gone out shopping. And when they came home, my dad was holding a bath towel between my legs, and it was covered in blood. And he told my mom that I had done a Russian split and split myself, and that's why I was bleeding so heavily.
And did the rapes go on for decades?
Yes.
And for Susan as well?
Yes.
Was he violent during these rapes?
Yes. He would, make sure he covered our mouth so that nobody could hear he would muffle our screams and such.
Did there ever come a time where your mother found out that your father was sexually abusing both you and Susan?
She didn't find out until I was in my late 20s because I was ashamed.
What did you and your sister do in order to try to prevent these rapes?
Well, we kept gaining weight because he hated fat women. And my mom also did that too because he was just, rough with her and nasty.
Was your father cruel to people outside of the home as well?
Yes, he was. He had no problem. Like, I remember one of his friends' daughter had gained some weight, and he's like, "Oh my God, you look horrible. You look like a stuffed pig." You know, just really nasty.
When your father passed away, was your father asking women out at her funeral?
You mean my mother?
I'm sorry. When your mother passed away, yes.
When my mother passed away, we had a service down here for our friends here, and he was asking women out. And then we had another service a week and a half later, and we went to New Jersey to our church we grew up in, the Hungarian church. And a lot of people, you know, came because they knew my mom. And I remember he asked the one lady, Lois, out that had been, you know, he tried to get with her when he was younger before he married my mom. And he was like, oh, and she's like, she actually introduced her husband, who was black, and he's like, oh, you married a black man? My father was extremely prejudiced, and he's like, you're tainted now. I mean, just cruel words.
Once your mother passed away, did your father kick you and Susan out of the house?
Yes, he did.
Has Susan suffered through a lot of bad car accidents?
Yes, she has.
And suffered several physical ramifications because of those accidents?
Mm-hmm. She also had a couple of horseback riding accidents, too.
Do you have a son?
Yes, I do.
And what is his name?
Gabriel Michael Lorincz Dunn.
Is Susan and Gabriel very close?
Very.
How would you describe their closeness, their relationship?
He absolutely adores her, and she's like a second mom to him.
Does Gabriel suffer from disabilities and mental health issues?
Yes, he does.
What kind?
My son was born legally blind. He can see with glasses, but he still has vision issues. I mean, his vision's still not, even with the glasses, he's still not 100%. He also has autism. He has ADHD and ODD, which is oppositional defiance disorder.
How has Susan helped you with your son?
Oh, she would take him on the weekends so that I could get a break and, you know, just get myself together. And she absolutely loved him. She took him all over the place, and he had a blast with her.
You spoke about when your brother attacked you the last time you saw him. Susan was there for that, right?
Yes, she was.
Can you tell us about that, please?
Well, my brother Stephen had come to live with us right after my mom passed away. And my dad was in Europe getting his next wife. And Stephen came in, and he was, you know, kind of drunk already and nasty. And we had just finished supper, and we made supper for all three of us. And my brother just left everything, and I had yelled at him. I'm like, Stephen, just bring your plate to the sink at least and, you know, clean off the table. And he's like, I don't have to do crap. I'm a guy. You're a woman. You need to do it. So he ended up, I'm like, don't be a pig. And he finally brings the plate over, and he throws it in the sink, and then he started screaming at me. And he basically got in my face. And at one point, I had taken a bite of some food, and I took a deep inhale, and I was kind of choking on it. And he kept screaming at me, and I was coughing so hard, I finally coughed it up, and it hit him in the face. And he took whatever he was drinking, and he threw it at me, and it had ice in it and was very cold. And then he took the glass and roundhoused me on top of my head, and he sliced the side of my head open.
Has Susan worked as an EMT paramedic in the past?
Yes, she has.
And has she discussed with you how traumatic seeing what she saw during those times were to her?
Yes, she has.
Did she also have a friend named Lizzie who was murdered when you all were kids?
Yes.
And did that very much affect both you and Susan?
Yes.
Has Susan seen a therapist in the past?
Yes, she has.
Is Susan a very private person?
Yes.
In what way?
She doesn't like people to know her problems. She tries to keep that to herself, and she always tries to help others instead of, making everybody feel sorry for her. She just does her thing, and she just doesn't let people in easily. You have to really know Sue to really get to, what's going on with her.
Where did you and Susan grow up?
We grew up in New Jersey.
And what was the neighborhood like? In Clifton specifically?
We grew up in rough neighborhoods. It was low income and it was just rough.
Before this incident occurred, had Susan told you that she was afraid of the deceased Miss Owens?
Yes, she was.
Did Susan tell you before this incident that she's been triggered by things that were going on in the neighborhood and that she could not sleep even with medication?
Yes, she did.
Susan a hard worker?
Absolutely.
Has she always maintained herself?
Yes, she has.
Financially?
She even helped me with my son, when I was short on cash. She always, made sure Gabriel had school clothes, even shoes. I mean, she was always there for me.
And you all actually have opened up restaurants together, right?
Yes, we have.
And run them?
Yes.
Successfully?
Absolutely.
What is your relationship like with Susan?
It's great. We're sisters and we love each other.
With everything that you all have been through childhood and going into adulthood, would you say you're close, you and her?
Yes, very.
And you still speak with her?
Yes.
Do you love your sister?
Yes.
Your Honor, I have no further questions.
No question. Thank you. You have your excuse. Thank you very much.
Dr. Yanis Castillo, Your Honor.
This is the doctor that's going to testify to the PTSD that Susan experienced, probably relating back to a lot of the events that we just heard about from her sister, which were terrible. I seem to remember that there were motions to bring stuff about this in court, or they tried to bring something in and it was sort of blocked because it wasn't the right time.
And stand face the clerk. Raise your right hand, please. Thank you very much.
Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes, I do.
Yeah, I had no idea it was going to go here. I thought we were going straight to sentencing. I'm surprised that defense had any witnesses.
If you please put the bottle of water someplace other than, yeah, thank you.
Yeah, we don't like advertising.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Please tell us your full name.
Dr. Yanis Castillo, Yenys, and my last name is Castillo.
Are you a licensed psychologist?
Yes, I am.
Out of where?
I've been licensed in the state of Florida since 2015.
And do you live in Miami?
I do.
Is that where your practice is?
I practice in various states, but I reside in Miami.
Will you please go over your educational background for us, please?
So I have an associate's in science degree from Florida International University, a bachelor's degree from Florida International University, a master's degree in clinical psychology from Barry University, and a doctoral degree from Nova Southeastern University.
What proportion of your cases throughout your career involve cases within the criminal justice system?
So towards the beginning of my career, I would say that maybe 20%, but now it's more like 95% of my cases are within the legal system.
Have you testified as a witness who was qualified to give opinion testimony as a psychologist in court before?
Yes, I have.
In what capacity?
So I have testified as a trauma expert, as an expert on adolescent brain development, forensic psychology, clinical psychology.
How many times?
Over 30 times.
Both for the state and the defense?
Yes, I have testified
over 20 times for the defense, and probably around less than 10 times for the prosecution.
What is your current position?
So I am in private practice. So I do clinical and forensic psychology. I also work for a company called R3 Continuum, where I do evaluations for employment, and that means individuals who are fit for duty, or when something happens, something traumatic happens in a workplace, like a suicide, or it could be a murder, it could be an accident. I go there and talk to the employees about psychological trauma.
And you also do forensic work as well, like you did on this case.
Yes, in my private practice, I do forensic work, and I'm also a pro bono evaluator for Physicians for Human Rights.
And you're licensed in the state of Florida?
I have been licensed since 2015.
Have you done any specialized training specifically in trauma?
Yes. So from the beginning of my career, I was interested in psychological trauma, and I have worked with exposure-based psychotherapies. I have worked in domestic violence shelters, in the VA hospital. I also did work in a clinic for adult survivors of childhood abuse. I have also worked with children who have experienced psychological trauma.
Have you evaluated and treated individuals with trauma?
Yes, so I would say that a good 80% of my clients or the people that I evaluate have endured psychological trauma.
Have you conducted any research in trauma?
Yes, so as part of my doctoral program, I did a dissertation on the impact of PTSD and depression, the relationship between that attachment and difficulty with emotional processing. And during those 5 years, I conducted research in a place called the Trauma Resolution and Integration Program.
And by PTSD, are you specifically referring to post-traumatic stress disorder?
Correct, post-traumatic stress disorder.
Have you spoken about trauma at professional conferences?
Yes, so I have spoken at local, national, and international conferences, including the International Society for the Study of Traumatic Stress, and ISSTD for the Study of Trauma and Dissociation, and in APA as well.
Have you specifically published in trauma-based things as well?
I co-author a book chapter on defensiveness, and that's mainly geared towards individuals with psychological trauma. Recently, I was part of a group that published about consensus as to what is a proper medical legal evaluation for asylum.
And have you conducted any other work related to trauma or forensic psychology in general?
Yes, so I usually remain part of committees. As of last year, the practice committee within the American Psychological Association.
Let me mute her for just a minute while she's giving her background. I have scheduled an appointment with my YouTube partner manager to talk specifically about this, trying to figure out why my stream is being treated that way, why it buffers and why it does all that. If other streams aren't, I do push a higher quality stream than most people do. But we'll try to figure it out.
Within the American Psychological Association, and I've done different types of editing. Recently, I did a peer review as they're trying to create a training. There was an effort to create a training for asylum legal evaluations.
Have you held any positions which involve training or teaching students specifically in trauma?
Yes, so I have taught at Berry University, and I was the clinical director of South Florida Evaluation and Treatment Center and the director of psychology there. So I was training students who were either pre-doctoral students or postdoctoral residents on how to conduct evaluation, forensic, and clinical.
Have you worked specifically with legally involved individuals who have a history of trauma?
Yes. So in addition to all this work, I was also the chief psychologist of the Miami-Dade County Jails. So and most of my cases involve individuals who are incarcerated.
Your Honor, we request permission to allow Dr. Castillo to give opinion testimony in the fields of psychology, forensic psychology, and specifically trauma.
There's no objection, Your Honor.
What do you mean by trauma? Psychology of trauma or trauma?
Yes, psychology of trauma, Your Honor.
Okay. I'll allow her to testify and form an opinion in those areas.
When did you become involved in this case?
I became involved in this case in November of 2023.
And I contacted you?
Yes, you did.
What were you asked to do?
I was asked to assess Ms. Lorincz for the presence of post-traumatic stress disorder.
And have you diagnosed Ms. Lorincz with post-traumatic stress disorder?
Yes, I did.
Okay. Can you tell us what is PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, in general terms?
So post-traumatic stress disorder is a condition that is in the DSM-5-TR, the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders. It's a condition that requires the exposure to a traumatic event, and this event may be experienced directly by the person, it might be witnessed by the person, or the person might hear that it happened to someone that is close to her or him, or also the person can be exposed during work. So after that, people might develop this traumatic syndrome, right? And it's composed of different clusters. So one is going to be a re-experiencing cluster where individuals are going to relieve the experience of trauma. So it's almost a failure to recover from this psychological trauma. The memories will come back either as flashbacks, as memories, as nightmares. There is another cluster, which is avoidance. So individuals are in pain, and there is an unconscious effort to avoid things that remind them of the trauma, or to even avoid thoughts and feelings that are reminiscent of this trauma. Also, there is part of a cluster that is an arousal cluster, and this is either hypoarousal or hyperarousal. So there's going to be a change in the reactivity of the body. And then there is another one that talks about moods and cognitions, and this is the idea that when we experience something severe, we start to feel differently about the way we view the world and ourselves.
Where do you find this definition of PTSD?
It's in the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, the DSM-5.
And what is that? What is the DSM-5?
It's the book that we use to diagnose in the mental health field.
Now, you mentioned before that PTSD can develop when a person experiences a traumatic event, right?
Correct.
Can you explain how traumatic events differ from everyday stressors?
So everyday stressors are things that our nervous system can somehow manage. So things like divorce or financial trouble. Those are things that can be stressful, but when we're talking about a traumatic event, we're talking about something very specific. A traumatic event is something involving either death, serious injury, or sexual violence. So those three things, the specific things. So when this happens, our ability to cope becomes overwhelmed. There is this speechless horror. We cannot adapt and recover. And this is when we develop these disorders.
Does post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD, look the same in every individual?
No. So when we look at those clusters that I discussed before, you will see that some individuals will have more of the arousal and more of that anger. They will be engaging in fist fights, and you will see that hyperreactivity. They might duck and cover if they hear noise. Some individuals are more on the developmental side of things, where they are going to be more sad and think lowly of themselves. So you can have many combinations, because out of the 4 clusters, you need one symptom in cluster 1, 1 in cluster 2, 2 in cluster 3, and 2 in cluster 4. So there are many combinations, and that will manifest differently.
Can a person with PTSD function relatively well in society without others even noticing that they suffer from this disorder?
Yes, and that kind of depends on the person and their way of coping. So if individuals are more in the re-experience side of this spectrum, and they're fighting all the time, the people might notice something is going on, but there are also like invisible signs of PTSD. So if somebody's constantly thinking about the trauma and having a flashback, others around might not notice that. If a person is having nightmares, others around might not notice that. So there are signs that are invisible, and there are others that are visible.
Once someone has PTSD, what is the course of that disorder?
So that depends on the risk and protective factors that the person brings with them. So most people who develop PTSD will recover even without intervention. And that is the course. But for other people, it's a lifelong disorder. And for example, when individuals suffer trauma in childhood, that's a poor prognostic factor, or that is going to be a bigger risk factor for developing PTSD.
Before we get into PTSD itself, can you tell us how the normal stress response works? In other words, how do we inherently respond to stress in the absence of PTSD?
So our bodies are wired to survive, and that is through different brain structures and through different powerful stress hormones and substances. So what happens is that we have within our brain what we call the low road, and that means we respond very quickly to stress when we encounter something scary. There is a structure in the brain that we call the amygdala, but it's like a smoke detector. And when that signals that there is danger, there is a cascade of processes that makes our bodies get stronger and quicker. So, for example, if we are in the woods and we encounter a predator, we would experience a surge in adrenaline, and that would mean that we're going to get stronger, more focused. The blood is going to rush to the organs that it needs to rush. We're not going to be experiencing digestion in the moment. It's almost like we're wired for survival, right? And that is what we call the low road. And that is very automatic. We don't really control that. There is another road, which we call the high road, and that is the prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain that engages in consideration, in planning. So when we encounter danger, actually, that part that is engaging in planning comes and says, okay, there is no danger. Even though like you feel this alarm, your heart is beating really fast, everything is safe, right? What happens in PTSD is that in essence, there is an overdrive of that fire alarm of the amygdala is very overactive. And the part of our brain that considers options, that thinks, that tells time, collapses. Actually, during PTSD, there is a part of the brain that might collapse in such a way, we call it like the prefrontal, part of the prefrontal cortex, where we cannot tell whether something happened in the past or something is happening now. And that's why we think individuals have these flashbacks, these intrusive memories where the person thinks, I'm experiencing this right now.
How does trauma impact a person physically?
So it's very important to know that psychological trauma is deeply biological, and that trauma comes back sometimes not only as a memory, but as a reaction. So individuals with psychological trauma will be oversensitized for danger. And that is what's going on in the body. The amygdala is hyperactive. The smoke detector is going on, and there is a false alarm. So there is a hyperarousal. The person might become very hypervigilant, tense up. And these are all things that are happening within our body. One of the things that happens is that at the end of this stress response, cortisol, which is a very powerful stress hormone, has to send a signal saying it's time to stop the stress response and go back to normal, rest and digest. And that doesn't happen in PTSD. We think that the person is experiencing these surges of anxiety in their body.
How does trauma impact a person psychologically?
So psychological trauma does different things. One is psychological trauma is going to attack what we call the attachment system, which is that bond that we have with our loved one, and that gets internalized in our personality. That's why when we are really afraid, we want our parents there, right? So when we experience psychological trauma, we start thinking, I'm damaged, I'm no good, I don't have a place in the world, and other people are not going to be there for me. And that's the attachment system, that sense of safety and security. It also makes people hyper-focus on threat. So they will see somebody crossing the street and they will think that this person is going to attack me. Sometimes that fear is not really rational, but it's part in the way that it changes us psychologically. We may avoid things, we may feel disconnected, damaged, like we're not part of this world.
How does trauma impact a person socially?
So individuals with psychological trauma might start to self-isolate. They don't trust people. Their trust is shattered. So they have difficulty with intimacy and with telling people their problems and seeking that support, which is very important for recovery of psychological trauma. They may perceive other people as aggressors, and they're going to have trouble with strained relationships because they might not develop those social skills.
How does psychological trauma interfere with healthy psychological development?
So, we now know that the brain is a social organ, and that means that the brain needs relationships to function properly and to develop properly. The brain develops from simple to complex. So in order for me to modulate my reactions and to modulate my emotions, I need to understand what they are, right? And in order for me to develop that skill of regulating my feelings, I need another nervous system. The child is born without any idea as to how he can regulate his distress, right? They're very reactive. They have a lot of cortisol going on. The child depends on the mother or the caregiver to regulate himself or herself. And then we go from this co-regulation to self-regulation. So we develop those skills. When psychological trauma happens while the brain is still development, it's almost like leaving a footprint on the wet concrete. We don't develop those skills because that's the time that we're supposed to be developing social skills, emotional skills. So you will see individuals who come to therapy as adult survivors of childhood trauma, and they don't know how to manage their money. They have difficulty with establishing a long-term relationship. They have difficulty keeping a job. They have different difficulties because it impacted their development.
Going back to Susan specifically, you said you were asked to assess whether she had post-traumatic stress disorder.
Correct.
Did you speak with Susan specifically?
Yes, I did.
And how many times?
I spoke to her 5 times.
For how many hours in total?
11.8 hours.
What were your clinical observations or findings about her current mental state when you spoke with her?
When I saw Miss Lorincz, she was psychologically stable. She was worried. She was anxious, especially about her sister and her sister's son. During the last times that I saw her, she was in a darker mood, and she was talking about the victim in this case. She said that has overtaken her thoughts even more than her case. Miss Lorincz was cooperative with me, but I also sensed that she had difficulty about talking about certain things. She's a very private person, and she's really not used to talking about this very painful thing. She's very ashamed of having been the victim of psychological trauma. Even though it's not her fault, she has internalized that guilt. And she didn't want to talk too much about her relationships and things like that. And you could tell that she was getting fatigued towards the end of the sessions. And she's like, when are we going to be done kind of thing, because she was experiencing pain.
Was she very remorseful in regard to Miss Owens and her passing away?
To me, she expressed, especially in the last 2 times that I saw her, that when she looks at this rationally, right, she said to me, I now realize that she was like a mama bear, taking care of her kids. And that's how I see her now. But that's not what I saw that day. And this is terrible. So she expressed that to me very remorsefully.
Did you speak to anyone else who knew Susan personally?
Yes, I did.
And you reviewed several records in this case, correct?
Yes.
And we don't have to go through all of them. Did you administer any psychological measures or tests?
Yes.
Okay. And let's start off with, when you assess someone for PTSD, do you limit yourself to a list of PTSD symptoms, or do you assess other aspects of the person's life?
I assess other aspects of the person's life because PTSD doesn't occur in a vacuum. So I want to look at also what are some risk factors that the person had and some prognostic factors.
Okay. And is going through the history of the family of the person that you're evaluating important?
Yes, it is.
And why is that important?
So we know that things like anxiety and depression runs in family. We also know that from generation to generation, trauma gets passed down through different mechanisms, right? And we don't totally understand all the mechanisms, but we know that even, for example, with children of Holocaust survivors, that the children might experience symptoms when they have never been exposed to trauma. So we're looking at the transgenerational dysfunction and how that shapes a person's choices.
What did you learn about Susan's paternal family that helped in your analysis of whether she suffers from PTSD or not?
So Susan's grandfather, his name was Stephen Lorincz. They have different pronunciations, the grandfather and the father. Was born in Transylvania. She indicated that at the time that was part of Hungary and it was occupied by Russia, and that he lost his lands. And when he lost his lands, he became severely depressed, he began drinking, and he ended up dying by suicide. This is her grandfather. Before that, he had been physically abusive towards Susan's father. The father leaves home at an early age, and he ends up in a concentration camp at around age 12 or 13. Susan's father, Stephen Lorincz as well, he ends up being raped in the concentration camp, tortured. He still had marks in his back, and he had a tattoo indicating that he had been a prisoner number.
What did you learn about Susan's maternal family?
On the maternal side, there is a Polish descent there, and she indicated that most of the males on that side of the family struggle with some sort of substance abuse issue. They discuss an uncle named Uncle Michael, who was very aggressive. They talk about an Uncle Freddie, who went to the Vietnam War and came back with PTSD, and he also had schizophrenia. They describe him as Manson-esque, aggressive at times. At one point in her childhood, he tried to set her house on fire while Susan was there with her sister. And on the mother's side, the mother was one of 6 children. She lost her father early, and there is reports that she was sexually abused by some of her brothers.
And her mother was depressed as well?
Her mother, both Ellen and Susan indicated that their mom was depressed, was very overweight. She weighed over 300 pounds, and she wouldn't do much. She would sit there and be depressed.
Why is this family history significant to you as a psychologist?
Well, one of the things is this damage that goes from generation to generation, this impairment in the parents, and then we'll see how Susan's father becomes an aggressor towards her and the sister and the brother, and then as well, this idea that they're not going to be protective of her, and they're actually going to be the biggest source of her trauma.
You spoke to Ellen Lorincz, Susan's sister?
Yes, I did.
What information did she give you about herself that was significant in your analysis on Susan Lorincz?
So Ellen indicated that she struggles with PTSD, with depression. She has done a lot of work, but she still struggles a lot with mental health issues. She indicated that their father raped them both for many years. So he raped Susan from ages 4 to 20, and he raped Ellen, the sister, from age 4 to 18. These rapes were violent. He would beat them up, sometimes to unconsciousness, and rape them. He was very verbally abusive. They lived in the same household. So she corroborated the things that Susan indicated.
What can you tell us about Susan's brother, Stephen Lorincz?
Susan's brother, according to Susan and to Ellen, had difficulties with drugs. He was addicted to drugs. He was also very aggressive, and they describe him as taking after the father. He was sexually abusive to both Susan and Ellen. They wouldn't get too much into that. And then there is an instance in which he gets upset after their mother dies. I think Susan must have been like 40 years old around this time. And Susan's sister was choking, and she spit on him, not wanting to do so. And then he took a plexiglass and broke it against her face. They called the police, and she indicated that, they both have a lot of medical issues, that she had to have neck fusion.
And you find that was there corroboration about her being arrested in Hernando County? I'm sorry, him being arrested, Stephen, in Hernando County.
Yes, I saw a record indicated that he had been arrested, and in the record, the record matched with what Susan told me about the event and what Ellen told me, and actually in the record, Susan gave a statement.
What is the relevance of Susan's siblings' history of mental illness, substance abuse, and aggression?
Because these are individuals who are living in the same household and they all get damaged in different ways. But it's also this legacy of silence, of protecting the abusers, is going to prevent these siblings from really supporting each other, either because of conflict or because of lack of ability.
Now, you mentioned that PTSD requires the presence of traumatic events. How did you assess the presence of traumatic events in Susan's life specifically?
So there is a checklist called the Life Event Checklist that has, I think, 16 traumatic incidents and one that is kind of like an additional catch-all. And this fits that definition of psychological trauma, sexual violence, serious injury or death, or the potential of these issues. So I administer that.
And Susan endorsed 13 of 17, right?
Correct.
And you mentioned before that, now is the purpose of LEC-5?
The leg 5.
Leg 5, thank you. To see if someone actually suffers from the issues in regard to PTSD.
So the purpose of this is before we assess PTSD, we need to make sure that the person actually has trauma, a traumatic incident. So this is a checklist of events that fit that definition. So the purpose of this checklist is to get the worst event, the event that haunts the person the most, and then assess PTSD according to that stress.
And what was it that haunts Susan the most?
Being raped and repeatedly raped and beat up by her father since age 4 to 20.
Are the results of this test consistent with someone who has post-traumatic stress disorder in regard to Susan?
So for the checklist, what I'm assessing is that she has all these traumatic incidents, so it's not about symptoms, but she has a lot of different traumatic incidents which would worsen the possibility of getting PTSD.
Now, you mentioned that both Susan and Ellen told you about the rapes that her father perpetrated, right?
Yes.
How old was Susan when the rape started?
We're gonna bail.
She was around 4 years old.
Hold on.
And did it last for decades?
Okay, we're gonna bail. It's the level of detail that's going into here is more than this channel is ready for. We might jump back in for the sentence here in a little bit, but it's becoming a little much. Let's see. I will say that somebody who's had a very traumatic childhood and is aware of it. I think they need to be doing things to get better, to resolve the issue. I mean, not that it's their fault, but that they need to make sure they're in a good place before they own a gun. Does that make sense? I don't like the idea of banning somebody who's had bad experiences happening to them from, at least in the United States, because we have the Second Amendment, banning them from owning a gun. But I think there's a responsibility as a gun owner to make sure there's, that you're in a good space, that you can be a responsible owner. All right, let's see if we can find just a wee bit elsewhere for just a minute. There might be another case for Judge Simpson right now. Just 1 second. Oh, let's go to Jeffrey Middleton. That'll be a nice break here.
What's your thought here?
Well, I understand she's a single mother, and she's struggling right now, but I'm willing to work with her. I mean, because I do, I feel bad, that this has happened to her, and I get it, she's, single mother and stuff, and I don't want to take all of it, all of it.
I understand, but I respect that. What normally was done is the parties are placed under oath, and sent to a private room. We're on the live feed, and I don't want to ask for things like your driver's license number and your social security number here on the record. Do you have your driver's license with you? Yes. And do you know your social security number?
Yes, I do.
All right. I want you to go out to the counter, and you can take a photocopy of her driver's record, and she needs to provide you with her social security number. Right now, you could garnish her wages, which would just make her probably lose her job. The judgment is good for 10 years. So you could wait until her circumstances change. But
this sounds like the person who lost in this civil suit is going through some really hard times, and the winner doesn't want to make them any worse. The judge is trying to give him options as to what he can do.
did you get a ticket?
Yeah.
Left out the hyphen. Fail to stop in short clear distance, and you did pay the ticket, so you don't owe the court any money on anything. But you didn't bring any of the things you were supposed to bring, but at least we'll get your driver's license number and your social security number. Then he can determine whether he wishes to pursue garnishment or try to work with you to make some sort of payment on this. But you caused a civil damage to him, and he's just out $7,000. And you're still driving around with no insurance, which means this could happen again. And you're a lesson learned for all the people that are driving around with no insurance.
They're moving my power pole.
If they get in an accident,
they're fixing my pole.
They're really behind the 8 ball.
Which means I'm going to lose internet.
I don't think he's going to garnish your wages. He could, which would take so much of your money, you'd probably have to quit.
They're moving the pole right now.
Mr. Rink, you got anything else you wish to say?
No, Your Honor.
Okay, hold on. Wait right here. Yeah, well, grab the Starlink. I've got to go set up my Starlink real quick because I'm going to lose the internet. I might be able to show you everything from outside. We might get a pole cam again, possibly. Are they like ready? Like all the trucks are here?
They're shoveling stuff out.
They're shoveling stuff?
They're digging the hole. They've got like 6 trucks out here.
Okay. Pole cam, here we go. We're gonna cut. We're gonna cut. I'm sorry. Okay, you're gonna be live in just a minute unless you move. There we go. All right. You guys, I'm gonna lose internet when that pole gets moved. That's just the gist of it. Pole cam is not what you think. We're gonna go watch them work the pole out of that position and move it like 6 feet or so. Or maybe just replace it. We'll see. But
in front of the Walmart.
Yeah, they'll put it in front of the Walmart maybe. Might be a quick stop for us here. Tonight, when you go home, please hug the people you love, smile at someone, make their day just a little bit better, and please stay safe till we go live again, maybe with the pole cam in just moments. So we'll see. You guys, catch you on the other side. Bye.